The fire started at 0200 hours. Sergeant Dale Briggs lit the match himself, holding it to the corner of the folded dress uniform like he was burning trash. His men laughed. Someone had spray-painted the word "charity case" across the back panel in red before they threw it into the oil drum. The flames took quickly, bright orange against the Afghan dark, and the smoke curled upward into nothing. She stood 20 feet away and watched it burn. Her name was Captain Elena Voss, and she said nothing. She was small, 5'4", lean, wearing civilian clothes because she no longer had a uniform to wear. Her hands were in her pockets. Her face was unreadable. The fire reflected in her eyes, and she did not look away, did not flinch, did not speak. Briggs crossed his arms and grinned at her across the flames. "Consider that your discharge papers," he said. She watched the last corner of the fabric curl and blacken and go to ash. Before we go any further, if this story already has your pulse up, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me until the very last word. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. Because what comes next, you will not believe it. Elena Voss did not look like a soldier. That was by design the first thing anyone noticed about her. She was slight in the shoulders, quiet in the way she moved through a room, the kind of woman whose eyes were always slightly focused somewhere past the person she was talking to. Not rudely, just distantly. The way you look when part of your mind is always running calculations the rest of the world cannot see. She had brown hair cut short and practical, no jewelry, no insignia, no marking of any kind that said what she was or what she had done. She drank water. She sat alone. She let people think what they were going to think. She had been on base at FOB Salerno for 48 hours when Sergeant Dale Briggs first noticed her. She was sitting in the mess hall at 0630 with a topographic map folded open beside her tray, a pencil in her hand making small marks near a ridgeline in the Paktia province. She was not eating. She was working. Briggs was 29, broad across the chest, the kind of man who measured rooms by who he could put down fastest. He had 2 silver stars and the complete and unswerving belief that those 2 facts made him the most dangerous person in any space he occupied. He sat down across from her without being invited. She did not look up. There were calluses on her right hand, thick ridges along the pad of her trigger finger and the knuckle of her thumb, the kind that come not from occasional training, but from years of repetition so consistent they had become permanent. He did not notice them. Most people did not notice them. That was how she needed it. Briggs looked at the map. Then he looked at her. "You lost, sweetheart?" She made a small mark near a grid coordinate and did not answer. He came back the next morning with 2 of his men, Corporals Harlan Tate and Kevin Munoz, who flanked him the way men do when they have decided to perform for each other. Elena was in the same spot. Different map, same pencil. Briggs pulled out the chair across from her and spun it around and sat on it backwards, arms draped over the top like he owned the building. "Chaplin's looking for volunteers," he said. "Blanket drive. Might be more your speed." Tate laughed. Munoz didn't, but he didn't stop Tate. Elena looked up from the map for the first time. She looked at Briggs with steady, pale gray eyes, and she said nothing for 3 full seconds. And that silence made him slightly uncomfortable, which made him angrier. "I'm trying to have breakfast," she said. Her voice was quiet and even. "Sure," Briggs said. "Go ahead. We'll wait." She looked back at the map. Her jaw was calm, her hands were still. Inside her chest, her heart rate had not moved from its resting rate of 51 beats per minute, a number she had maintained under worse conditions than a sergeant with a performance complex and an audience of 2. She had been measuring the distance between the ridgelines in the Paktia grid. She had been thinking about angles, wind shear, the weight of a .50 caliber round over 3,800 meters. She went back to thinking about those things now. The third morning it escalated. Briggs came alone, but he brought the uniform. It was her spare dress uniform, Class A, pressed, hanging in her quarters. He had sent someone to get it while she was at briefing. He held it up by the collar in the middle of the mess hall, high enough for the room to see. Someone had spray-painted across the back in red block letters, "Charity Case." The room went quiet. Elena stood up from the table slowly. "Where did you get that?" she said. Still quiet. Still even. But something had changed in her eyes, a temperature shift, cold in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with assessment. "Found it lying around," Briggs said. He was smiling. Nobody who matters leaves their uniform lying around. She looked at the uniform. She looked at the letters. She looked at Briggs. "Give it back," she said. He dropped it into the oil drum by the doorway. He lit the match before she finished speaking. What Sergeant Dale Briggs did not know and could not have known, because the file was classified above his clearance level, was that 14 months earlier, Elena Voss had been lying on a mountain ridgeline in the Coast Province at -11 degrees Celsius, cheek against the stock of a Barrett M82A1, breathing at 6 breaths per minute, watching a valley through a Schmidt and Bender scope for 9 hours and 42 minutes without moving. She had been there because 38 men were pinned down in that valley. The mission designation was Operation Coldwater. A combined joint task force, Delta Assets, Rangers, and 2 SEAL fire teams had moved into the valley at 0300 to extract a compromised intelligence source. The exfil had gone wrong at the second checkpoint. An ambush, pre-planned, executed from 3 elevated positions on the eastern ridge. The task force was cut off. Comm was degraded. The 2 closest air assets were 40 minutes out and unable to loiter in the weather. She had been in the overwatch position already. She had been there for 11 hours before the mission even began, which was standard for her, which was why she had been assigned to this one. Her call sign was Ghostline. Her file listed a confirmed kill count that the Army would not officially acknowledge. She had been shooting long-range precision since she was 19 years old, trained first under Master Sergeant Harold Voss. Her grandfather, her instructor, the man who had told her that the best shot you ever take is the one nobody hears until it's over. He had died in Fallujah when she was 22. She had taken the news in the field, between shots, and finished her overwatch before she allowed herself to stop. She had a photograph of him in the left breast pocket of every uniform she owned. At 0347 in the Coast Valley, she began engaging targets. First contact, enemy commander, elevated position, eastern ridge, 3,920 meters. Wind from the northwest at 14 kilometers per hour, slight downgrade, air pressure dropping. She dialed the correction. She exhaled. She squeezed. The commander dropped. She was already dialing the next correction. Over the next 4 hours and 17 minutes, Elena Voss fired 23 rounds from the Barrett M82A1. She neutralized 11 enemy combatants across 3 separate elevated positions. She held the eastern ridge suppressed long enough for the task force to move their wounded to cover and establish a secondary extraction point. She directed 2 of the 3 SEAL fire team leaders by radio to alternate corridors using a code system she had memorized before the mission briefed. When the air assets arrived, the valley was navigable. The extraction went without further incident. 38 men came home from the Coast Valley who would not have come home without her. The after-action report used the phrase decisive overwatch contribution. It used the phrase minimum effective force. It used the phrase clean execution under extreme environmental conditions. It was classified. The men in the valley knew her call sign. Most of them had never seen her face. 4 months after Coldwater, she was rotated to a different theater. 7 months after that, she was at FEOB Salerno, working a new grid, drinking water in the mess hall, letting people think what they were going to think. Sergeant Dale Briggs was not on the after-action report. He had been on base during Coldwater, recovering from a knee injury sustained in a training exercise. He was never in the valley. He had no clearance for Ghostline's file. He knew nothing. He lit the match because he thought she was no one. The morning after the uniform burned, Elena was in the operations center at 0630 for a briefing she had requested herself. The S2 intelligence officer was a major named Charlotte Reeves, who had served 2 previous tours, who had seen enough to be careful about what she assumed, and who had been quietly watching the situation in the mess hall since day 1. Major Reeves pulled Elena's file from a locked drawer. She placed it on the table between them without speaking. Elena looked at the cover. Then she looked at Major Reeves. "I need to get back to work," Elena said. "I know," Reeves said. "That's why I pulled your file." She opened it to the Coldwater section. The asset list, the grid coordinates, the confirmed engagements, the call count. 23 rounds, 11 contacts, 38 personnel extracted. She turned it so Elena could read the summary paragraph, which Elena did not need to read because she had written it herself. "Sergeant Briggs has submitted a conduct complaint against you," Reeves said. "Failure to identify rank. Failure to respond to a senior NCO. He's requesting your removal from the rotation." Elena was quiet. "He doesn't know," Reeves said. "No," Elena agreed. "Do you want him to?" Elena thought about the oil drum. She thought about the spray-painted letters. She thought about her grandfather's photograph, which had been in the breast pocket of that uniform, which she had retrieved from the ash at 0300 when nobody was watching. Charred at one corner but intact, his face still clear, his eyes still the same steady gray as hers. "He'll find out," she said. "The right way." The briefing happened 4 hours later. Colonel James Whitaker assembled the senior NCOs of FOB Salerno's combined task element at 10:30 in the main operations room. It was a standard theater briefing. Updated enemy grid positions, revised extraction corridors, task assignments for the next 48 hours. Dale Briggs was in the 3rd row, arms crossed, still operating under the belief that his complaint was pending review. Colonel Whitaker walked to the front of the room. He did not use a presentation. He used a single printed page, which he held up without reading from it. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to make an introduction. Some of you have seen Captain Voss in the mess hall this week. Some of you have made assessments about who she is and what she is doing here." He paused and looked at the room with the particular stillness of a man who is not asking a question. "I am going to correct the record." He set the page down. "Captain Elena Voss holds the call sign Ghostline. She carries a confirmed long-range engagement record across 4 combat theaters that this command is not authorized to discuss in full. In October of last year, during Operation Coldwater, she occupied an overwatch position for 14 hours at -11 degrees in the Coast Province and conducted 23 precision engagements that enabled the extraction of 38 personnel from this task force." He stopped. The room was completely silent. 38, he said again quietly, the way you say a number when you want it to land like weight. "Many of whom are in this room right now." Briggs had gone very still in the 3rd row. His arms had come uncrossed. His face had moved through something, recognition, calculation, the specific kind of horror that comes not from danger but from understanding, arriving all at once, what you have done. Whitaker picked the page up again. Captain Voss will be leading the Overwatch element for Operation Irongate beginning at 0400 tomorrow. She will have command authority over all elevated fire positions. Her orders are my orders. He looked at the room. Any questions? Nobody spoke. At the back of the room, Alina stood with her hands in her pockets. She had not moved since Whitaker began speaking. She was looking at a point slightly above the heads of the assembled NCOs, calm, expressionless, the way she always looked when the room was just starting to catch up to what she already knew. Briggs turned in his seat and found her eyes across the room. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then, she looked back at the colonel, because there was work to do. That evening, Corporal Kevin Muoz found her at the range. She was running dry drills with a service pistol, drawing and resetting, slow and precise, the way you practice when you are not trying to prove anything to anyone but yourself. He stood at the edge of the range for a moment, not speaking, until she lowered the pistol and looked at him. "I didn't laugh," he said. "I know," she said. He nodded. He looked at the ground. He looked back at her. "Coast," he said. "My team leader was in that valley. Sergeant First Class Daniel Park. He talks about Ghost Line." He stopped. He never knew who that was. Alina was quiet for a moment. "He made it home," she said. It was not a question. "Yeah," Muoz said. "He made it home." She nodded once, the way you nod when something has been resolved that needed resolving, and she raised the pistol again and went back to the drill. Muoz stood there for another moment, then walked back across the base into the dark. Briggs requested a transfer. 2 days later, it was approved. Alina did not attend the morning mess hall for 3 days after the briefing. When she came back, she sat in the same seat, ordered water, unfolded a new map, picked up her pencil, and began making small marks near a ridgeline in the Logar province. Nobody sat across from her, uninvited. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself, that does not wear its history on its face or carry its record into rooms ahead of it. It is the strength that lets fire take what fire wants, that watches the ash and calculates the next step, that understands the only thing worth proving is the mission and not the argument before it. Alina Voss did not need Briggs to know who she was. She needed the mission to succeed, the men to come home, the grid to be read correctly at 4 in the morning in -11 degrees when the valley below her was burning and 38 people were depending on a woman they could not see. That was her work. That was her answer, not to the man with the match, to the men who needed the shot. The loudest people in any room are working hardest to convince themselves of something. The quiet ones already know. And the ones who protect without credit, who serve without spectacle, who burn down to ash and go right back to work, those are the people the rest of us quietly come home because of.